Hello everybody, how are you doing? This is Rob of Rule of Two Review. Welcome back to the channel. And today you almost think that I would be kidding, but we have even more to discuss that revolves around the possibility of Nintendo's next console, their next hardware, their next generation machine, their Nintendo Switch 2, their Nintendo Schmoopity-Doo, like I joked about, whatever they end up calling the thing, and whenever it releases, there's more to talk about. And you guys know that I like this conversation. I've been talking about it for over 2 years, and a lot recently. And I didn't plan on making a video about this topic, but literally, with Nintendo's recent financial report, they actually did discuss it a little bit in their Q&A section because they were asked a question about it, and Furukawa from Nintendo did respond and said some very interesting stuff, and it has a lot of people talking and thinking, and it continues to further the conversation and dialogue I've been having with you guys for a while, and it does feed off of some of the next generation videos I've made over the past week or two. And so yeah, of course, how could I miss an opportunity to talk about this? Now, I wasn't sure when I was going to be able to talk about this because, as I had shared on Twitter, I've actually been pretty sick the past few days, and I was planning on taking some more days off before I came back to making any videos. There's a couple of things that I've wanted to talk about. This popped up yesterday, and it's like, oh man, that is something I really need to discuss, but I am just too sick to do it. And while I am still pretty sick, and I am struggling to talk with a scratchy throat and all of this stuff, I've started to feel a smidge better. I have a little bit of a second wind here. I'm on a short break from work because I am working from home today due to being sick. And it's like, I feel like I can make a quick video talking about this because I have so many thoughts. So, if you're excited to hear me discuss this, you've lucked out because today should not be a day that I'm able to discuss it, but man, I just have to. Now, the initial breakout for this story actually began earlier this week, like I said, when VGC was probably one of, if not the first outlet to kind of talk about this. Like I said, there was a Q&A session with Nintendo and Furukawa where they were talking about and asked about whatever might be happening with future hardware. And VGC's initial translation in their reporting, which is the one that I saw, I'm not 100% sure if it was the first time this news went out as this quote, but it was basically framed as Nintendo saying that their transition into their next console is a major concern for them. And that obviously sounds alarming, but actually reading the details made it sound fairly promising that they're ultimately saying it's something that they're taking very seriously because they don't want to do it wrong, they want to do it correctly. And while major concern is a very specific verbiage that maybe raises some alarm bells, the fact that they were even talking about it or thinking about it at all, to me, was very telling, and also very much said that, yeah, they're considering it now and they're talking about it now because it is something that they're actively doing and probably preparing for, whereas in prior years, they would basically just say, we're not doing it, we're not thinking about it, now's not the time. Instead, they addressed it head on. However, it does get more interesting and a little bit juicier when after that, Nintendo actually put up their own translation into English, where they further explain exactly what they were talking about and what Furukawa was saying, and it is different. The verbiage is different than the transition being a major concern for Nintendo. So here is the update on what Furukawa was actually saying. On the other hand, looking back on past experiences, a generational change, such as the change from the Wii and Nintendo DS eras, we recognize that one of our tasks is ensuring the transition to future generations of hardware is as smooth as possible. To that end, we are focusing on building long-term relationships with our consumers through Nintendo accounts. While continuing to release new Nintendo Switch software for consumers to enjoy, we aim to maintain relationships across hardware generations through services that utilize Nintendo accounts and by providing opportunities for them to experience our IP through other non-gaming channels. So there's quite a bit to take away from that, but like I said, I think for me, and maybe this is me being biased just because I've been so focused on this conversation for, like I say every time it comes up, 2 years. It was literally 2020 when I first started talking about Nintendo looking at next-gen hardware, not an upgrade or a Switch Pro or a minor upgrade, but a significant upgrade in their hardware to next-gen capable tech sometime around this window of time. That's always been the key, right? 2020, I was predicting in 2022 or 23 that Nintendo might do this. Not because I heard any inside information, not that I was leaking anything, nor was I trying to start rumors. It was just me, a fan, guessing, okay? And using my own logic and deductive reasoning to say, this is what I think makes sense, right? And the fact that it's starting to appear more and more true with each new piece of information we get is certainly interesting, and it's exciting because, man, I love the Switch, but I am ready for something a bit more capable. It's not that it's going to ruin my life or ruin my day if I have to be stuck with the Switch for a couple of more years, but it doesn't feel appropriate, right? Aren't we all feeling ready for Nintendo to do this? I think many of us are. In fact, I even see that many and most people are in my conversations, in my comment threads, in my Twitter timeline, and the polls and stuff that I put up, that people feel more ready now than they have before. Which brings us to these quotes, and yes, initially VGC or other places may have mistranslated it, and the headline of major concern might have thrown people off the scent, but if you read the context of what they were saying, and now even more so with this clarification from Nintendo about what they're saying, that they just want to ensure a smooth transition from the Switch generation into whatever the next thing is, I only read this as overall Nintendo finally opening the door for conversation, and they're being very slow and calculated with it, but they're saying, hey, yeah, we're obviously thinking about it because it's something we need to be prepared for. Now, in my most recent video about this topic, I had discussed with you guys the idea of how Nintendo would treat the transition from this current Switch generation into whatever they do next, and when is the right time to do it. And that was, by the way, before any of these quotes and any of this stuff got out there, right? This was just kind of based on a random conversation and some polls I put out there that I wanted to have with you guys. And this very much touches on it, because it's not just about, oh, when does the Switch end and when does the new thing begin? It's how will Nintendo, who's uniquely involved in the gaming industry currently, how are they going to handle this? How are they going to plan for it? How are they going to ensure that the timing that they reveal and then release their next console, whether it's this year or next year or in 20 years, whenever you want to believe that thing is going to happen, how will they ensure that it's done properly and maintain the proper momentum? Because that conversation I had with you guys revolved around the times where we've seen Nintendo do it wrong and the times we've seen them do it right. Do they wait for sales and interest in their prior generation to slow down or die and try to revive it with a new device? Or do they introduce and release the new device at the time where the brand is strong and the hype and sales are still strong? Do they carry strong momentum into a new generation? Or do they wait for it to slow down and die and try to revive it after the fact? There is a case to be made for both, and I discussed it in that video in your guys' responses. I personally believe the best thing to do is for them to carry the strong momentum, and the Switch is strong momentum. It's selling incredibly well, they're releasing and making great games, and again, the overall brand and concept of Nintendo as a company is very strong. The average consumer and the average gamer, even if they're not a Nintendo fan, let's say, the average person, fan or not, knows Nintendo is a quality company, is a successful company, makes great stuff, and that they're selling their product like crazy. Record-breaking sales for their hardware and software. So again, that's why I keep saying the brand. The brand of Nintendo is at borderline, maybe even an all-time high. I mean, maybe the NES era might be an all-time high based on the context of that time period, but either way, the Switch era is in contention for their strongest era ever. I mean, and you just can't deny it no matter what you feel. And so how that relates to Furukawa finally talking about ensuring a smooth transition, it just tells me that they're aware of the exact idea I brought up earlier this week with you guys when I put those polls up and made that video discussing it and shared my own personal thought. And my personal thought may be wrong, but I do still believe in my personal thought that they need to carry the momentum. And I'm hoping that what Nintendo and Furukawa are saying here is that that's the kind of thing that they're planning and preparing for. And if so, while sales are still strong, like they are right now, they are also starting to slip, right? I think they sold about 5 million or so less Switches this year compared to last year. And in theory, that might be continuing. And so they could still be really strong, but also seeing a decline. And so I just feel that my initial prediction going back to 2020, 2 years ago, that probably next year in 2023, I really think we're getting that reveal and possibly the release of the next machine. And I think that I talk about this stuff so often with you guys. Releasing the next generation machine doesn't kill the Switch right away. The Switch will still sell for 2 or 3 years, and they'll still support it for 2 or 3 years after the next machine is revealed. Not to mention the fact that if Nintendo is smart, and I think Furukawa was trying to say this, if they make their next machine backwards compatible so that Switch games can be played on both the current Switch and whatever the next machine is, then again, they get to continue to do both 2017 Switch and next-gen Switch, or next-gen hardware, whatever it is, and they can support both with a lot of the same software while still making stuff that will be unique to the new device at the same time. And that just solves everybody's problems, including Nintendo's problems that they're talking about here, of ensuring a smooth transition. The delay of Zelda could very much be a sign that they're willing to make that cross-generational Zelda game, like I've said for a long time, and support both the old Switch and the new piece of hardware at the same time. I've said for a long time, I think Metroid Prime 4 has a phenomenal chance of being cross-generation. I still feel that, and this could be a way for them to do it. Maybe the next Mario Kart game, also going to be cross-gen, I've said for a long time. This is a way that they could do it, And these are just the things, Switch doesn't die day one, they can support it for years. They can make games cross-generational. They can also make it backwards compatible. This just makes it all work, and I think that Nintendo's finally starting to say, yeah, we're planning for it. We're not going to mess this up. We know how to do it wrong because we've done it wrong, and so we're going to make sure to do it right when we come out of the mega successful Switch and try to carry that strong momentum into the next generation. Some of these other quotes are also talking about this idea of how they want to keep the brand strong, also through Nintendo accounts, so that people feel kind of stuck, so to speak, to Nintendo as a brand and the accounts, and playing stuff across the old Switch and the new Switch and the mobile devices and whatever other platforms they want to do. They also talk about strengthening the IP through other outlets like theme parks and movies, and that stuff is fine, but it's not really interesting to me, and it's not the element of this conversation that I really take away from these quotes. To me, it's all about the next generation, the next Switch, the next device, whatever it turns out to be, the timing of it, the transition from Switch generation to the next generation, and it's such eerie timing because of that video conversation I made with you guys just earlier this week, and I knew this investors meeting was coming up, but I didn't expect this to happen this way, so it's just a crazy coincidence, and it's very fortuitous that discussion feels more relevant now after this Q&A session and this answer from Furukawa on this exact topic. So I find it all fascinating and interesting, and I really hope that it just turns out that Nintendo's planning the next device sometime next year, not because I dislike the Switch or have actual problems with it, but because, like I said earlier, I just feel ready, and I know in my heart that most of you guys feel ready too. Maybe you're one of the few people that doesn't feel ready, and that's okay. No one wants to take that away from you. I do not want to take that away from you. That's not what these conversations are about. It's just about the actual practicality of what is happening or going to happen, okay? And so this is just how I see it. What do you guys think? How do you interpret these quotes in this whole situation here? How do you feel about my interpretation and my reading of these events and quotes? And with that, this video is a wrap. Thanks, of course, as always, for tuning in, guys. This is Rob of Rule of 2 Review, and I'll catch you next time on another video. Bye-bye.